Welcome everyone to another NASCAR Heat Evolution setup video. In this video, we'll be taking a look at Charlotte. And before we go ahead and get into the setup, let's talk about the AI speeds and the track itself. The AI at max difficulty, which is 105%, will qualify at around a 29.3 second lap, with their race pace being around a 29.8 second lap. So those are the numbers we need to beat in order to compete or beat the AI at max difficulty. And the setup that I'll be showing you in this video is capable of running anywhere from 28.9 second laps to about a 29 flat. In fact, the sample lap I'll be showing you at the very end of this video is a 28.9 second lap. Now let's talk a little bit about the track itself. It is a 1.5 mile track with a lot of banking, and this is really the first track that I can remember in the game that gives me that sense of speed, which is something that's really missing for me for the most part in the cockpit view. You just don't, in general, feel like you're going that fast in this game until this track. This track gave me that sense of speed and that really sense of being on edge as you go through the corner because of that speed. So keep that in mind as you tackle this track, because in my opinion, you'll feel like you're going every bit of the speed you're going. All right, so let's move on to the setup itself. We'll start on the left-hand side of the screen and look at the shock settings. For those of you who've looked at previous videos of mine will notice that it's 10s across the board, basically because I've seen really no good reason to change these and mess around with them very much. I choose to focus on other parts of the car to get the car to handle the way I would prefer. Let's move on to the bottom left portion of the screen and talk about weight settings. Because this is an oval and we're exclusively turning left, then our left side weight is maxed out at 54.2%. Our nose weight, or front weight as they call it, is at 50.2%. It's a little bit lower than some previous setups simply because I need the car to turn under throttle and quickly, because these corners are very quick. So I needed a lower percentage of nose weight. Moving on to wedge. Again, those of you who have watched previous videos know that I normally like to keep it at 51%. That gives it, in general, a good feel for me. Well, in this case, I needed to reduce that to 50.4, and some of you may want to reduce it even further. And the reason I did that was simply because, again, you're carrying so much speed around this track, and you're on the throttle so much. In fact, we'll talk about a couple of ways to run this track in a moment, but you're on the throttle nearly the entire track. And so I needed the car to really rotate faster than I was able to get it to using some other means and being stable at the same time. So I decided to lower the wedge a little bit, and I think the results bear out that that was a good idea. Both the front and rear ride height stay at the minimum. Let's move on to springs. The front springs, I use the maximum left front spring at 1,200 pounds, and the right front just 200 pounds less than that at an even 1,000. The reason for using the stiffer left front than the right front is because that actually helps the car turn on entry. So let's move on to the rear of the car. The left rear spring is at 400 pounds, right rear spring at 500 pounds. That gives us 100 pounds of rear spring split. And as you probably remember from previous videos, if you've seen, the reason I like to use a smaller rear spring split is because it helps to stabilize the car under throttle. And again, because we spend so much time on the throttle at this particular track, using such a small split as that really helps to stabilize the car. All right, let's move over to tire pressures. The front tires, you can see the difference between the front and rear. Both left sides are the same at 25 pounds. Both right sides are at 50 pounds. So that's a full 25 pounds of split between the left and right side tires. Now, the bigger that split, the more the car will turn to the left. So keep that in mind. If the car is rotating a little bit too much, then you can lower the right side pressures a little bit. All right, let's move over to the miscellaneous settings. And as you can see, left front and right front are both maxed out at 10 degrees, the left side being at a +10 and the right front being at a -10. Front sway bar, as normal, is at 1.5 inches, and we're not using a rear sway bar. The track bar, you can see there is a 1-inch split in the track bar from left to right, with the left side being 1 inch higher at 11 inches and the right side being 1 inch lower at 10 inches. And the reason for the left side being higher, again, is to help the car rotate better on entry. I didn't really need the help from the center off the corner, which would have been a time that I wanted to use the higher right side setting, but I really needed the help on entry, so I used a little bit higher setting on the left side. And that brings us to the brake bias, which you can see here is not the same as what I've used in previous videos. Normally I like to use around 70%, and that helps stabilize the car under braking. Well, we're not going to really use the brakes much, if any, at this particular track. But the reason it's lower here is because of one of the two ways that I see you can effectively drive the track. The first is what you're going to see in the sample video that will follow this discussion in a few moments. And that is, you simply lift a little bit off the gas on corner entry, allow the car to set and rotate, and then get back on the gas hard. But there's another way of doing it, which is to basically trail brake the car going into the corner. Now, what that means is, as you're going into the corner, you won't actually lift off the throttle at all. You'll keep the throttle matted the entire way around the track, and simply you drag the brake just a little bit on entry to help slow the car down a little bit, and also to help it rotate on entry. So what function does the brake bias serve in that? Well, as we've discussed in previous videos, the higher the brake bias number, the more the car wants to go straight when you're braking. But in this case, I wanted to use the brakes in a little different capacity. Rather than just strictly slow the car down, I wanted it to help the car turn a little bit on entry. So I decided to lower that number some. So the more you lower that number, the more you're putting rear brake in the car, and the more the car will want to turn while you apply the brakes. So if you want to give that method a shot and actually try to keep the throttle full and all the way to the floor on entry and simply drag the brake a little bit, then that's something to keep in mind. If the car wants to get really loose as soon as you touch the brakes, then you'll want to increase the brake bias some. And on the other hand, if the car gets tighter and doesn't want to turn whenever you touch the brakes, then reduce that number some. Okay, moving on to the grill tape is 0%, as is normal. It'll be interesting to see if the developers ever give us a reason to use that, but so far they have not. Wheel lock and steering offset I don't really mess around with. Steering offset is something you can start to play around with, increasing that number if the car is pulling hard to the left and you want to try to help that some. Again, these cars are going to pull hard to the left because that's what they're designed to do, because we're designing them to run through the corners as quick as we possibly can. So that'll take care of the setup itself. Let's look at the gear. As is normal for me, I don't mess around with the individual ratios of first, second, third, or fourth, with the exception of generally fourth gear. I like to run a 1.0 gear there. The rear end ratio that I finally decided on was a 3.33. That winds out the RPMs and gets them pretty close to 9,000 on corner entry, so I definitely wouldn't want to use any more gear than that. But you could actually reduce that number some, maybe all the way down to a 3.0 or even lower, depending on how you want to run it, and that will change the handling some on the car. So if you want to affect some changes in the handling of the car, the gear is something that you can use. By lowering the RPM, it would generally help the car to turn a little bit more and make it a little bit freer. So that takes care of the setup, and stay tuned now. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to show you a replay of a 28.9 second lap around the track. Hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for more NASCAR Heat Evolution.